Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Um, Thank you for logging on time to our last of the 5-week crash course. We're going to start in a few minutes. In the meantime, if you guys could write in the chat box your name and what NeighborNet you're from for attendance, and then we'll get started, inshallah. Okay, inshallah, we'll start. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. بسم الله. Again, for those of you who just jumped on, thank you for jumping on to our last of the 5 sessions for this crash course. And I hope that whatever has been said has been beneficial so far. Just jumped on, make sure that you are writing your name and what NeighborNet you're from in the chat box on YouTube so we can mark your attendance, as attendance really matters. A couple of housekeeping things to get through. Make sure that you have done the quizzes for each of the 4 sessions. So there should be like a 2-minute quiz that's for every session. Just make sure you read through the notes, watch the session on the YouTube link, and go to the PowerPoint before you open up the quiz because it's closed book, and get through that. Especially if you haven't been able to make all the sessions, because it can count as your attendance for that. And we're going to judge based off of who's done the quiz or not when we evolve this leadership series into something more. So with that said and done, let me get started, inshallah. We'll be talking about, the model of leadership effectiveness. So we're actually going to be discussing a specific model. Give me a second. As always, we are going to have some discussion questions, and those discussion questions are posted on the slides from beforehand when you see them. So when you see one on a slide, make sure that you're thinking of a response to give when we break for it. Your discussion is really helpful and to see if you guys are, if we're engaged, if we're paying attention, if we have a good understanding, and just more importantly, everyone has their own perspective and their own opinions, and being able to share that is what makes this world a beautiful place, because we all have different opinions and all have different perspectives and the like. So inshallah, with that, we'll get started, inshallah. Just to give a summary, because it's been quite a while, we had a few objectives of this leadership series. So the first was to understand the nature and process of leadership from an Islamic perspective. It was to describe the characteristics of effective leaders in general and of Islamic leaders in particular, to analyze our styles as a leader and a follower, to learn how we can mobilize, organize, and develop members, to learn how you as a leader can build commitment by acting as a coach and a mentor. And today we're going to be discussing the steps that will enable us to become a more effective leader or follower. So session 5. So this is basically the model of effective leadership that we'll be going into depth in today. So altogether, this is what it is all at once, and then we'll break it down and go into each of the things. So the first step, for example, is to challenge the process. So searching for opportunities and taking risks. And the second is to inspire a shared vision. So envision the future and enlist others' help in that, others to act. So foster collaboration, empower others. And then the fourth is to model the way. So you set the example and then plan small wins and reward those too. The last is to encourage the heart and recognize individual contributions and celebrate accomplishments. So let's get into the first one. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask in the chat box when we break for the discussion question, or a break in general. I can take a look and answer those, inshallah, or anyone can answer those. So the first thing is challenging the process. So leadership is an active, not a passive process. So basically, one example of it being active and not passive is that you don't wait for people to join. You go out and you actively try to build a membership. And I see that around a lot sometimes. Like, we are afraid to go out and give a testimonial of YM, or we're afraid to go into our high schools or whatever and pass around club cards and say, hey, come to YM. Like, it shouldn't be something that we are ashamed of at all, because I think many of us can testify that YM has been the one thing that has helped us change our lives for the better. It's been a means through which Allah has guided us. So why wouldn't we want that for other people? Why wouldn't we want that for others? So do not hesitate to go out and let people know, let your friends know what YM is, and encourage them to become a part of something that's much bigger than them. Because we all have a purpose if we're living in this world. It's not just for dunya. So, so you don't wait for people, you go out and you build active membership, or you build actual membership. And while ineffective leaders sit around, wait for Allah to help, successful Muslim leaders challenge the status quo, and they articulate an impelling vision and mission and then ask Allah for help. So they do their part and they rely on Allah's help, but that doesn't mean that they don't do their part. Sometimes we think that everything, like that tawakkul means that, Allah will take care of everything and you don't have to put in any of the effort, which is not true at all. Okay. So in challenging the process, leaders have to be innovative. They often have to redefine the process in a way that tears down the physical and mental barriers that were imposed on them. So when you're taking risks and when you're experimenting, you often have to redefine the whole thing, and that can be very, very scary. But that's sometimes the only way to change things, is to break down the way that things are, and that's okay sometimes, as long as you've thought things through and you're not just being impulsive. So, in challenging the process, leaders search for opportunities both internally and externally. So within an organization and outside of the organization, they're always thinking of ways to expand or take things to the new level. So they look for ways to change or improve the status quo. And these opportunities may include, an innovative new service or activity, or maybe reorganization, or maybe the realignment of the mission of the organization itself. So you don't have to keep doing things the way they have always been done. If you think something needs to be changed, think of ways to change them and bring it up with the right people. So that, like within YM too, if you don't like the way some things are, if you think some things are ineffective, often the reason that some things are the way they are is because it's better than nothing. And that maybe no one has thought of anything better, or maybe we don't have the resources for anything better. But that doesn't mean that you keep going with things the way that they are. So, for example, if we're a leadership in YM, and we are, YM should be on our minds. We should be thinking of ways to maximize our work. Imagine if all 30, if everyone that is in this hangout right now, in this live stream right now, or anyone that has been in this hangout before, imagine if all these people did that. YM would transform in phenomenal ways if all of us were thinking about YM on a bigger level, if all of us were thinking of ways to maximize NeighborNets and stuff like that, and not just trying to do what's already been done. So to help leaders in their search process, leaders need to use shura and consult with people both inside and outside the organization, because members use many of the services that the organization provides and can provide critical insights since they are closest to the problem areas. So it is important to talk to people that are in NeighborNet, active members, about things like YM. It's important to talk to other leadership about YM. It's important to talk about other people outside of the organization about YM, because each has their own point of view and their own perspective. And you don't have to follow what every single person's telling you. But it is something that you can use to open your mind a little bit. So leaders also experiment and take risks while challenging the process. So they do so with the understanding that their effort may not always succeed. Each failure, however, can be viewed as a learning opportunity. So I personally feel like we shouldn't be afraid to make mistakes. That's the way that you learn. That's how you can say, yeah, we tried this, it didn't work out, maybe we'll try to do this now. But if you play it too safe and keep things the same exact way, then one day your organization will become irrelevant, because you're not changing anything. You've been the same way since 20 years, and that brings us to our discussion question. So I know that there is a little bit of a lag between me talking and then it reaching your ears, and then you guys being able to type on YouTube, so I'll give you a couple of minutes. But can you think of some ways that you can actively seek out opportunities for your NeighborNet or any aspect of YM? So you can start with specifically your NeighborNet, and if you can't think of anything, that you can think of a department, you can think of a campaign, or you can think of anything to do with YM. So I'll give you guys a moment. I will take a look at the YouTube chat box. So can you think of some ways that you can actively seek out opportunities for your NeighborNet or any aspect of YM? Okay, networking with other organizations, youth groups, volunteer, and charity organizations, definitely. Look into the larger community for volunteer opportunities, soup kitchens, animal shelters for ways that we can volunteer. That is a good point. Awesome. Okay, so if anyone says anything after this, I'll take a look in a bit. And let's get back to the next portion, inshallah. So, so we just talked about the first step, which was challenging the process. And now we're going to move to the second thing, which is inspiring a shared vision. So in challenging the status quo, a leader needs to have a vision of what the organization needs to accomplish, and that is her main task. Let me share my screen again really quick. Okay, so talking to people about YM, especially at schools, graduations, making a YM shout-out presentation, you never know people are interested until you ask. That's very true. Sometimes people just don't know what YM is, and we overlook these small things. We overlook word of mouth, but that is an excellent point of view. Or even if you have any mentors in your life, right, like any teachers or anyone that you have appreciated their perspective at one point in your life, you can talk to them about YM, ask them for their input, ask them for what they think, and often these are the people that like challenge you anyway, so they would challenge you to see YM in a broader light. Okay, let's share this. Okay. So, inspiring a shared vision. So in challenging the status quo, leaders need to have some sort of vision. And that's the main task, and that's what's going to pull the entire organization forward. So we already talked a little bit about vision in many of the sessions that we've had so far in this 5-week crash course. But a vision is critical because it's the source of the mission statement and the long-term strategy of the organization. So the vision of the leader does not need to be detailed. In developing that vision, the leader needs to answer the following question, and that is, what is our organization seeking to do and to become? And a vision can be extremely motivating and needs to be extremely motivating. So for example, when it comes to even our ummah, right? The Muslims need to believe in the future envisioned for this ummah by the Prophet ﷺ. You know, we need to keep ourselves focused on this vision, whether in triumph or in defeat. So wherever they are, in whatever condition they may be, Muslim leaders must keep the ummah moving forward towards this vision, and that's the same thing within any organization. So unfortunately, the process of visioning can suffer from several defects, so it's not always that easy. And I'm going to be talking about 4 sources of defective vision that should be highlighted and should be mentioned so that we can check ourselves. And the first of them is egocentrism. So basically, this is when the vision reflects a preoccupation with the personal needs of the leader rather than the needs of the ummah or the local community. So the vision of the Amira, it should not be self-centered or limited to the interest of a special group. Islam in general is against that concept where people put the needs of their own group or their own clan or their own family ahead of the needs of the whole community. So to avoid this, the leader needs to involve as many members as possible with the appropriate expertise in the development of the organization's vision. So by doing so, she will ensure, inshallah, that there is commitment to the vision. And shura is an integral part of this process. So the key idea is that the vision of the leader needs to be shared by the sisters under her direction in order to increase their commitment to its implementation. So if you're the only one who knows the vision and you're the only one who agrees with it and you haven't conveyed that to your shura, especially, let alone your NeighborNet, it's going to be very hard for you to expect them to commit to the organization because they don't believe in it the way that you believe in it. They don't know half of the things that you are that you do. And when you don't have Shura that's on board or committed, and you don't have these different opinions challenging you or expanding on your ideas, changing your ideas, and then coming up with something together, then that is one way to follow into the first source of defective vision. And the second source is the resource gap. So sometimes the leader has miscalculated the resources needed to implement the vision. So often the leaders, underestimate how much they have and how much it's going to take to accomplish a certain goal. So to avoid this mistake, the leader may engage in an analysis of the internal strengths and weaknesses of the organization, as well as the external opportunities and threats faced by the organization. And this analysis is called a SWOT analysis, which is the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So the SWOT, the S in SWOT stands for strengths, the W stands for weaknesses, the O stands for opportunities, the T stands for threats. So has anyone done a SWOT analysis of their NeighborNet? And if you have, would you care to share a bit from that experience? And if so, like if you've done it for your NeighborNet, mention that. If you've done it for your region, mention that. If you've done it for national, mention that. I know we did it at NNCC together last year, so that's one thing that can be that experience. If you've done it with your NeighborNet, that's kind of what I'm interested to know, if you've also taken the time to do it with your NeighborNet. So comment that in the YouTube chat, and I shall take a look. Inshallah. Okay, so Kainat, you said that you've done it for nationals, so do you want to share why you think it's a good tool? And if anyone's done it for their NeighborNet, mention, and if you haven't done it for your NeighborNet, mention why you think it might be good for you to do so. Didn't realize I was on mute. But it lets you discuss your NeighborNet and your organization in an organized manner. You think about your strengths, your weaknesses, discuss problems and the future. Good, so it's something that's very well rounded and it covers lots of bases. If you do a SWOT analysis, you often get to talk about both past and future, like past, present, and future, which is good. And you talk about like the different aspects of it, like what are some ways that we can do better? What are some ways that we haven't done better? What should we continue? What should we improve on? What are things that might stop us? So it covers like all bases. Sometimes if you discuss without any plan, then you might miss something. The SWOT helps you look at everything, yeah. I haven't done it for my NeighborNet or region yet, but I know Ignatius Wing uses it. So I feel like it's useful. It'd be useful because sometimes we get caught up in the day-to-day tasks of NeighborNet, but SWOT analysis can help us step back and look at our progress overall. Excellent point. It is really, really, really important to take that step back and to look at our progress overall. Otherwise, things just become, you get stuck in this daily thing, and you're not even daily thing, this might be a weekly thing for you, and you might think that you're not making any kind of difference, or what's happening, or NeighborNet becomes boring or whatever. So this is a good way for you to look at the bigger picture and make sure that your NeighborNet is an asset for these girls that are coming, is an asset for your people who are planning on Shura, and is an asset for the community that it's a part of. So Zirwa says, I have not done it, but I think it is important to do because it helps to remind us of our vision and our goals. Definitely. Okay. Thank you, guys. Now let's go back to our model of leadership effectiveness. So now we're going to move to the third step, which is enabling others to act. Actually, I haven't finished. Sorry, I didn't finish the closed system perspective and stuff like that. And I guess just another point about the SWOT analysis in general is that, and Zirba mentioned it, and so did Ganatin and Kava, that it is something that reminds everyone about the vision overall. And the vision more realistic for the members within an organization. So, the vision should provide a stretch, but it should not be one that is impossible even in the long term. So, for example, if you have a vision that says for like, let's say a newspaper or a news something, right? Like, what if your vision for that is to become the leading religious media outlet in North America? That's an impressive vision for a new Muslim media organization, but such a vision may take a very, very, very extremely long time to happen, and may discourage the members in the short term because it's such a huge idea that you might feel like it's never going to happen, or you don't even know how to measure it to see if it's happening. So instead, a vision that would state something like to become one of the leading Islamic media outlets in New York City, that's more manageable and achievable within a decade. And leaders must have vision, but they also need to be realistic. So that was just one thing I wanted to mention about the SWOT analysis. And now the other source of defective vision, the third one that we're going to talk about. So we talked about the first, we talked about resource gap. Now we got to talk about closed system perspective. So a leader who maps out a path for his or her organization without taking into account what is happening on the outside is acting as though the organization is a closed system. So several Muslim organizations actually have fallen into this trap where initially they're effective, the organization becomes disconnected with external events as it increases in size. And then when that happens, eventually the services no longer address the needs of the Muslim and the non-Muslim communities. So as leaders in YM, for example, we need to constantly be aware of the growing trends and changes that are happening in society. If we are out of touch, we become irrelevant, and then people won't be able to relate. And then we're kind of doing ourselves an injustice there. So it's really important to know, especially because a big part of YM is the sisterhood. If you want to develop those bonds with people, you need to know what's happening. You need to know what are things that might interest these girls, especially if you're older now and the girls that are coming into YM are younger. You have a responsibility to them. We all needed people when we were that age, and now God put us in a place where we can give back, and so we should take advantage of that. So we talked about the SWOT analysis before, but again, the SWOT analysis here, it can really help an organization scan its external environments for emerging opportunities and threats, and then you can plan accordingly. So leaders should set time aside for a yearly SWOT analysis, or a quarterly, or twice a year in the middle of the year kind of thing. So during these analyses, they should scrutinize both their internal and external environments and see, what is stopping us, or what are opportunities for us on the outside, and what is stopping us, and what are things we can improve on, or what are things that we are doing that are well from within our organization. And then revisit your strategic plan, and then adjust the vision statement if need be. Because remember how we talked about every NeighborNet should have a vision. On the basis we're all the same in terms of meeting on it consistently, whether it's weekly or bi-weekly, having shura meetings, having halakas, having activities like that stuff, yes, is standard across the nation, because there should be something that is YM's culture, right? But that doesn't mean that a NeighborNet in New Jersey is going to do the same halakha topics, or is going to follow the same exact flow, or is going to do the same exact activities as a NeighborNet in California. You know, you need to have that vision. You might be in different stages of development. You might have different crowds. So you need to really adjust your vision depending on that, or your mission or whatever, depending on that. And the last source of defective vision that I want to talk about is groupthink. So the process of shura, you know, it might be distorted if the leader surrounds herself by unquestioning members, because then the outcome of that consultation and whatever will be limited to validating her decisions. So you don't want yes men. You don't want people to say, yeah, you're right, yes this, yes that. So that drive for consensus and then at the same time suppression of dissent is known as groupthink. And leaders must be aware of this dysfunctional aspect of group decision making, and they must ensure that members who are consulted are not afraid of voicing their opinions, even if it contradicts everyone else. Reminding to myself or anyone else. So we're not looking for yes men. And if someone's challenging us, of course it should be done in a respectful way. It should be done without like complaining, because sometimes when you mix complaining and like contradicting something, it becomes messy. So you have to make sure that when you are contradicting someone, you also have something to back it up. You have some logic to back it up, and it's not coming off as complaining. So that's just important to remember. And then if you're the one that's being contradicted, just take a step back and appreciate that perspectives that are being given to you, and that is the point of shura. As long as at the end it's not that you decide to do nothing. Sometimes you look at something from all aspects. You weigh the pros and the cons, and sometimes the decision that you make, it's not that it's going to be free of cons. It just has to be that the pros are more important in that given scenario. Okay, so now we're going to move to step 3, which is enabling others to act. So as I mentioned earlier in this 5-week crash course, leadership implies a social exchange process between leader and followers. So that means that a leader needs to actively foster collaboration, because it's a joint effort of a leader and followers that make things happen. So to build collaboration among members, the leader needs to promote interaction amongst them as frequently as possible. That means call them, text them, meet up with them, especially outside of YM Fridays. You shouldn't just know each other within the context of YM or within YM events or YM NeighborNet. You should make an effort to call each other or text each other or meet up with each other outside of that, because that is what's going to build sisterhood. Because one day, as I mentioned in our last session too, we're gonna not be in YM, or we're gonna graduate or whatever. We don't want it to be that we lose these friendships because we didn't actually make them friendships. We just had professional relationships. But yeah, the other thing is to not put a prestige curtain between you and your members. So emphasize the long-term goals and benefits over short-term objectives and gains. So ensure that goals of your organizations require teamwork over individualistic efforts. So it should be a thing of jama'ah. It should be something that everyone can work on together. And then finally, the collaboration can also be fostered by nurturing trusting relationships between yourself and your members. So when a leader trusts her members to take charge of a problem, this fact will energize them and will lead them to come up with solutions that the leader may never have imagined. So that trust means a lot to people. Members must be able to see that their work is meaningful and is significant, and they must be encouraged to take ownership of a task or responsibility. Besides fostering collaboration, the leader must strengthen others, and the key to strengthening others is through empowerment and through delegating. So both concepts share the same idea, that power is an expandable resource, and the more that a leader empowers her members, the more she has strengthened them. And while strengthening her members, the leader will also need to raise their level of commitment to the cause. So the more members feel that they are personally responsible for a course of action, the more committed that they feel. And then another thing to remember when it comes to enabling others to act is that when members who have committed themselves to a previous task continue in that task and the project isn't working out, and they keep receiving negative feedback, then you really have to reevaluate that. You have to see if the member is becoming too attached to a project that is continuously underperforming, and then maybe rotate her out of that project and assign it to somebody else and fit that other sister to another project that fits her better. We shouldn't be afraid to be able to do these things, and it goes back to having a good enough relationship with people that you can do something like that. And that you need to remind yourself and other people that, you might get attached to something, but it's not about you, and it's about Allah's work. And this is something that we got to rotate, so that, because this is a movement, and like I was thinking about this last night too, about how people come into their role and then leave, and don't support the person that's filling their shoes, and while there's definitely a balance, it's just important to be able to still check in with the other person from time to time, especially like NeighborNet coordinators, checking in with each other, because you're still in the same area mostly. You can still meet up and talk about things that are happening with the NeighborNet, even if you're no longer active in the organization anymore, because then this person feels like they don't have that support, and it becomes a lot for that person. And it goes back to like that idea of movement, so even if you're done with your position, your time in YM shouldn't just be about those positions, like whatever you learn, you mostly, when you're in a position, you don't understand what the heck you're doing until your time is up, so by the time you're done with your term, you have so much more experience and so much more that you might be able to give to others, so that is your time to be able to give. Don't be afraid to offer your support and your opinions and your emotional support to the next person that's taking on your shoes, especially. And our organization should not be one that's just about position. So if you're in a position, then you're helping, or then people are coming to you for your opinions. Just because, like if you've completed a term, the experiences that you learn don't leave you. They're still in you. So we should take advantage of that, and we should be able to offer that to the people that are still in the organization. Okay, so that leads us to our next discussion question, which is, what are some ways that you plan to do? What are some things that you do or plan to do in order to help enable others? I'll give you guys a moment to chat in the YouTube box thing. Okay, so what are some things that you plan to do in order to help enable others or help empower them? What are some things that you can do if you're a regional coordinator? What are some things that you can do if you're a NeighborNet coordinator? What are some things you can do if you're a Shura member, whether NeighborNet locally, regionally, or nationally? What are some things that you can do to help empower others and get others to act? Already do. This is something that you're already doing. are some things that you plan to do in order to enable others? In whatever capacity that you're already involved in. Okay, so include them in planning and discussion of events for your NeighborNet. If you give them a responsibility, be sure you give them constructive criticism and highlight what they did well. Very true. So, I know a lot of NeighborNets actually, when they're annually planning, they do a portion of it within their shura, and then they also do a portion of it with the entire NeighborNet. That way you can get ideas and input, and you can see what your NeighborNet members like and what they want to see and what they want to see more of. So Zid was saying, to empower others, we can highlight our members' skills and give them tasks that they would be able to accomplish, excel, so that they are motivated. Very good. And for that, we need to really make sure that we have good observational skills and are perceptive enough to know what like people's potentials are, and what are some things that they would like being a part of, and then work to seek out those opportunities for them and present them with those opportunities when the time is right. Okay, now let's go back. Okay, and ensure that they know their feedback and opinions are valued and not being dismissed. Address their concerns and questions, definitely. Very good points. Let's go back, inshallah. Let's bring out the last couple of steps. Okay, so the fourth step is modeling the way. So amiras or leaders must not remain static after they develop a shared vision and empowered others. They must model the way themselves. So first of all, they need to be clear about their beliefs, and then they need to practice what they preach. And by practicing what we preach, we make it clear to our members that what our core values are and what behavior should be emulated. So more importantly, the Prophet ﷺ modeled the way for companions, and it is still the example that we all give to talk about. Like the fact that we even time and time again have mentioned him through this course, and in general, whenever we talk about leadership or anything, we talk about the Prophet ﷺ's sunnah, we talk about his character, we talk about his adab. So that is just a testament to the fact that he modeled the way so much so that it's something that we still discuss years and years and years later. And even in the Quran, in Surah Al-Qalam, ayah 4, Allah says, وَإِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ. So Allah even testifies to his excellent character. So while modeling the way, the leader must remember the level of maturity of her members, because that's going to affect the degree and speed at which they follow her example. So because there are differing levels of member maturity and the nature of the task, a leader must break down the goal into small, manageable chunks. So as a result, she will be aiming for small wins. And small wins are important because they provide the members a sense of accomplishment and give them self-confidence. So when you're planning something out, whether it has to do with tarbiyah or whether it has to do with the NeighborNet, the way NeighborNet is running, or maybe like if you're part of a national campaign or something like that, create smaller chunks and make them small wins. And that way, it's very motivational just to see yourself getting places, because sometimes what ends up happening is, like, at a NeighborNet level, I think things are still somewhat tangible. Certain aspects of things are tangible, like especially if you're doing an event or something like that. It's something on a weekly basis you see happening in front of you, But then as you kind of like move further in the organization, whether regionally or nationally, things become less and less tangible. And so it's easy to start thinking, okay, like I'm not doing anything, like nothing is happening. So it's really important to break your goals into small chunks and then make those small wins. So that brings us to our next discussion question, which is, What are some small wins that can be rewarded within the NeighborNet Shura process? So, what are ways that you can, what are some tasks or, um, yeah, like what are some tasks that you might have for your NeighborNet Shura that you want to break into small manageable chunks, and then when they have accomplish those small chunks, you can reward those small wins or appreciate them for those small wins, and they can feel like they're actually accomplishing something too. So it could be in terms of maybe organizing a NeighborNet event as a shura, or maybe it's like the social media aspect of a NeighborNet and having a shura member take charge of that. Like, what is one aspect, and what are some small wins uh, associated with that aspect that can be rewarded in the process? Yes, make sure that if you haven't mentioned your name, you do so now for attendance. And I think this might be the last. Yes, this is the last discussion question. So I want to see some different people also giving an answer because we're about to close in a few minutes, inshallah. So, what are some small wins that you can think of that you can reward within the NeighborNet Shura process? Okay, so let's say we have like a week in the lives of a Shura member and the whole process of planning a NeighborNet, right? Whether it comes to choosing a halakha topic, choosing a halakha giver, finding a place, deciding the activity. So, in just this weekly process alone, what are some small chunks, manageable chunks, or some small wins that you can think of that you can reward your NeighborNet Shura members based off of that you can appreciate? So, let's say that they found a halakha giver or whatever, you can appreciate that, and reward them and encourage them. What are some other things? What are some other, in that process alone, what are some other small wins? okay. My laptop just died, so I won't be able to see your comments in the YouTube chat anyway. So I'm sorry if you wrote it and I just couldn't see it. So inshallah, we'll just close now. So the last step was encouraging the heart. 1 second. Let me just make sure you guys can hear me. Okay. Alhamdulillah. Okay, so the last step is to encourage the heart. So we talked about challenging the process. We talked about inspiring a shared vision. We talked about enabling others to act. We talked about modeling the way. And now we're going to discuss encouraging the heart. So succeeding in the path of Allah is difficult, and we know that we will be continuously tested. And an appropriate ayah that can help us at tough times and will help us refocus and strengthen us is the example of Prophet Yaqub, when he says, and it's an ayah in the Quran, "Oh my sons, go and inquire about Yusuf and his brother, and never give up hope in Allah's soothing mercy. Truly no one despairs of Allah's soothing mercy except those who have no faith." So it's important to thank everyone in an organization, and Allah says to show gratitude to His creation too. So part of being thankful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is being thankful to creation. And we know that people don't work for Allah's cause with the desire to gain recognition or earn material rewards, but a pat on the back can energize them for the road ahead. It is the leader's job to demonstrate to them that they can win with the help of Allah. So the leader shouldn't just wait until the projects are completely finished or completely successful before encouraging members. One of the most important tenets of motivation is a law of effect, which is that behavior that is rewarded will be repeated. So accordingly, leaders should establish the targets along the path to long-term objectives. Whenever their members reach a target, they should celebrate their accomplishment so that they are encouraged to continue making progress. If anyone has any questions, feel free to post it in the chat box, and then I'll have maybe Rukhma or someone text it to me because I can't see it on my own at the moment. But with that, we are concluding this 5-week crash course, and I want to thank everyone who's made the time to come out, actively listen and discuss effective leadership with each other for these past 5 sessions, and then completing the quizzes too. And more than that, I would really like to thank all of you for committing to something like YM in the first place, because I know it's not easy and it takes up a lot of energy and time and mental capacity, but know that this is worth it. You know, Allah will ask us how we used our time and how we spent our youth. And, you know, I pray that we all have something to show for the work that we are doing. You know, sometimes we may want to up and leave, but sometimes that's Shaitan trying to stop us from doing the little good that we might be engaged in. You know, he might be saying, what's the point of this? I'm not doing anything. I'm not accomplishing anything. Because, again, truly at a certain point, our work seems to become less and less tangible. We have more on our minds. We aren't just enjoying NeighborNet as a member. Now we are responsible for these girls. You know, our experience in YM changes as time goes on. We go from benefiting from it and enjoying the company of people to running things to going even further to keep the organization running smoothly and efficiently. So never, never, ever underestimate the effect that YM is having on these girls. You know, like we're talking about ways that we can improve and how we need to make sure that we are maximizing our potential and reaching the everyday girl and the everyday crowd. But remember the whole, like throughout this entire thing, that where YM is at an excellent place too. It's at a pretty good place. The fact that we even have such an organization, the way that this organization is literally laying down the framework for Muslims in America. And you know, we aren't meant to change people, but this is a means through which Allah has guided and changed
our hearts for the better, and it has guided and changed many hearts for the better. And if we stop doing the work we are doing, just think of that impact. Like, just imagine for a moment if everyone ran from responsibility and felt like there's no point of doing what they're doing, if they're and then let's say that there are no NeighborNet clubs. Think of yourself. Think of those girls. Like, what would you be doing with your life? What would you be doing on those Friday nights? Where would we be? Sometimes I don't know where I would be if it wasn't for YM. And I'm thankful to Allah that He has guided me and that He's guided all of us. Alhamdulillah. But it's also important to remember that this is Allah's work. This is Allah's deen. This is Allah's mission, and He can easily replace any one of us. It's not about you or me or our friends. Like, if our friends leave, we're gonna leave. It's not the way that it works. It's that Allah has chosen us for something greater. And I ask Allah to purify our intentions and to accept from us and reward us and our families with Jannatul Firdaus. And may He always keep us busy and working for His sake. Ameen. So with that, I'll end, inshallah. Remember to complete the quizzes, inshallah. After maybe later today or tomorrow, we'll send out an email for the 5th quiz. Make sure that you and all of the people in your NeighborNet Shura or your regional Shura or wherever, whatever level of YM that you're involved in, have completed the quizzes, have watched all of these sessions, and we'll have more planned for you soon. Actually, most of you should have also gotten a form or an email saying something like YM 101 Ask Away. So that is a place where you can ask any questions that you might have, share any concern that you might have, whether it's about YM's policies or the work that you're doing in YM, or in general personal stuff too. If you're struggling with something with your parents or balancing school and YM and work and everything like that, or any issue that you're having, it's anonymous, so we won't know who's saying what. We'll get those responses, and then we'll arrange for a YM 101 Ask Away session on YouTube where we can address these concerns and these questions, inshallah, sometime in July. And yeah, I think that's all that I had to say. Hopefully, I'll see you, many of you guys, in person soon, inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. Assalamu alaikum, everyone.